Okay, looks like I'm live. For some reason, there's always a delay. And for some reason, my camera is not set up too well. So basically, in this live stream, I'm going to answer one of the questions that I got a few weeks ago, which was requesting me to speak about social anxiety, um, which is something I can speak about with some degree of intimate knowledge as someone who definitely had it for quite a lot of my life, and then kind of went to the other extreme and got very comfortable public speaking or being the center of attention in that kind of arena. So I can kind of talk about where it comes from, why it occurs, and then really what the solutions are. And I can tell you from my own journey with that, basically, for one part of my life, I was very outgoing, very lively, very energetic. And then I think around, I don't know, junior high, I kind of went the other way. Got very depressed, got very angry, got very withdrawn, and then kind of stopped really understanding people and understanding situations and just went down a whole kind of negative pathway of mental and emotional health. So I can speak on the subject from kind of many different arenas. And I think some of the solutions might be a lot simpler than people might think. So the question was, could you make a full video about social anxiety? You recently touched on it in a live stream. You said overcoming it involves realizing how little people actually pay attention. Could you provide any examples? Do you have any additional advice? The only advice my therapist provides is to sprinkle a little mindfulness on it, which tends to make neurotic people a little more neurotic. Um, and then by social anxiety, I mean self-consciousness and fear of negative reactions from other people, leading to, typical physical anxiety sensations and just avoiding social situations and relationships in general. Feel this way in pretty much any social situation, including basic ones like talking to a cashier at a grocery store or just kind of basic level anxiety around anyone. The only people I don't experience that with or close people I've known with years. Dealt with it a whole life, although the issue has waxed and waned. I think isolation due to COVID and working from home has made it worse. So I think just as a jumping off point, I don't think you're alone in that situation whatsoever. I think COVID and the lockdowns and working from home and social media and dating apps and Netflix and all this whole loneliness culture that we have now um, has really hindered a lot of people's ability to just relate on a basic human level and cause those things to atrophy. And I think just in as a general commentary that people are not yet so aware, or some of us are, but a lot of people aren't, to the actual negative side effects and consequences of the lockdowns. So definitely you're not alone in that. And I think, social anxiety and worrying about these things is something that a lot of people deal with. And I think, unfortunately, in my limited experience from what I've seen with a lot of therapy modalities and self-help is it tends to just kind of emphasize the wrong qualities and lead people down the wrong path and just kind of end up not being very practical or useful or pragmatic in the sense that it doesn't tend to really resolve the issue, give people the solutions that they actually need so they can actually get over the thing and move on with their life. Tends to be kind of like what I joked about, is just sprinkle a little mindfulness on it or talk about why or explore your feelings, but that doesn't necessarily solve the problem. So now just getting into some solutions, because I don't really need to explain too much about what that thing is, because I think if you're watching it, if you deal with it, you already know what it is. So I would say from my personal experience, this is what I found to be useful and I found to be helpful. Judging in from some just reflective self-analysis things, and then I'll get into just more practical things to actually do and to change the overland quality. So the first is, reflect on what you're actually afraid of. What is the actual worst case scenario? And realize that it might not actually be that big of a deal, because sometimes that's what makes it so bad. Is it's like kind of basically what happens is the fear or the memory or the event is brought up in our mind, and our awareness is kind of like, "Ugh, ugh," just as that's the reaction to it. It's like, oh, no, 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 forget that. Just push it away. So we want to move out of that reaction at least to at least be able to sit with it and be like, well, I don't know. Worst case scenario, what am I even afraid of? Like, um, someone might think you're weird or might not be, it might be an awkward situation. Okay, you're not going to die. Your life isn't under threat. So it's not that big of a deal, or something that maybe you can learn to laugh about or have a more of a lighthearted view on. So that's the first thing. The second is, which I'd mentioned before, is start to reflect on how little people actually notice. Because if you're already kind of stuck in your head or kind of being neurotic or overly paying attention to yourself, sometimes as a way to start to get out of that, to help pay attention to what other people are doing, is to pay attention to see what they actually notice, what they actually respond to, what they're actually communicating, what they're actually cued into. And that can help get you out of yourself a little bit and cued into other people. And then you also start to realize just how little people actually notice and how much they're just in their own world most of the time. And then it's also important to notice when you yourself or another person are caught up in this kind of, hyper self-absorbed, neurotic, anxious state. Notice how little you're actually listening to other people, how little you're actually present to what's actually happening, and how mostly your awareness and the energy of awareness is consumed just in your subjective, feelings and sensations. So that's why I said earlier that sometimes these modalities or these therapy things that people do end up making people worse or go down the wrong path, because it's just, let's just get more adept and more emphasized and more absorbed and involved in your subjective, fleeting, transient, sensations in your body, which of course can be great as a basic foundation of awareness to jump off from. But basically, that's also the definition of neuroses, meaning like, oh my God, now I feel this. Oh my God, now I feel that. Now I feel this. Now I feel that. Because, what we feel is, for a lot of people, constantly always changing and adapting and responding to things. And being neurotic is just being so absorbed into that is now your sole reference point. Of course, maybe it's something you want to take note of as a human being, of course, but as your sole focus of your awareness, that's not a healthy place to be. And I think, unfortunately, this is where a lot of people are stuck and where a lot of modalities send people to. So, on the last piece of just developing more awareness or a different mindset, obviously, reading books or just reading videos or looking at articles about emotional intelligence 2.0, or just getting some basic understanding of communication, watching videos, watching, free classes online about communication, about conversation, about socializing. Because for some people, the anxiety comes from like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what's expected. So if you can just get some basic frameworks of, this is kind of the what's expected, this is the general idea of what's happening here. Sometimes that can just alleviate the anxiety, because now you're like, oh, now I know what we're doing. Now I know what's expected. I know the ritual, I know the routine. So whenever I'm faced with it, it's not always starting over from scratch, because sometimes that's what causes people to be anxious, is every time they're like, oh my God, what do I do? What is this? What's happening? Because socializing and communicating with people is something that comes very easy and very naturally to a lot of people, and it's something that does not come very easily or naturally to other types of people, and something that people struggle with. And even if it comes naturally to certain people, it doesn't necessarily mean that they could be good at it, or very adept. Something that really is a skill that can be developed over time. So in terms of just cognitive reflective things that a person can do, I think the things that I just gave are, good jumping off points. And again, you can really just watch free videos online, look at different things, and just, learn, so you have that baseline of familiarity. Because personally, that's when I tend to feel, anxious or kind of uncomfortable, which is kind of natural. Because if you're put into a situation where you have no idea what's going on, you don't know what's expected, and you don't know what to do, and you don't know where you fit in, the natural outcome most of the time is discomfort. That's natural, that's obvious. That doesn't mean you are broken. That doesn't mean you're dysfunctional or messed up. It just means that pretty much anyone put into that kind of situation is going to have a certain degree of discomfort. Comfort is usually found through familiarity and through competency in something. So, usually, if you're anxious or uncomfortable, it's because you don't have familiarity, you don't know the expectations, and you don't have competency. So, if you develop those things, then usually you'll feel better. And that tends to be the distinguishing factor in situations. So now to more practical things, which might sound stupidly simple, but I think are unfortunately things that I don't see a lot of people doing or recommending, which is just simply getting more confident, becoming healthier and stronger, becoming more physically fit so you have more energy, and then learning to actually communicate better. Because if comfort is found through familiarity and competency, then obviously having more familiarity, more competency will make you feel more comfortable. Just getting the reps. And then, getting more comfortable in yourself, getting stronger in yourself across the board is obviously going to be a really useful thing and something that I overlooked for many years. And I think it's a really easy thing to do, especially if people are naturally, more introspective or creative or intellectual or whatever you want to call that. It's easy to miss. Just get more physically fit. Just get healthier, just have more energy, just feel stronger in your physiology, and you'll naturally feel better in these situations. Because it's one thing that I really noticed a lot, very commonly, especially when I arrived into, alternative scenes, health healing, or spirituality, or creative things in that regard, is I realized just generally on how generally unhealthy most people in those arenas were, in just like a baseline level of physical fitness and vitality. There's a certain level of dullness and just kind of like lethargy that is there that people experience and feel, and then they mislabel as some kind of psychological, behavioral deficiency, when maybe it's just the fact that they need to be more physically fit and strong in their body, just to a baseline level. I'm not saying you need to, you know, become Arnold Schwarzenegger or something. I'm just like a baseline level. And I can tell you within myself, personally speaking, that is definitely true, or been proven to be true for myself, which is odd for me to say since I was such an active athlete for, the first 18 years of my life. And then I kind of went to the lethargy, spiritual, intellectual, creative, sensitive type. And just, and then as I got, in the last however many years, got stronger and more fit, but there's, still, still more room for me to improve. But I just noticed that to be a major distinguishing thing. That's really easy, really simple, and really not difficult to do whatsoever. It's something that pretty much anyone can do. And I think everything I've described so far to a high degree will make a massive difference. Maybe it won't be 100%. Maybe a person will always have some degree of awkwardness or some degree of nerves in them, which is fine. That's just part of being a human. And if you talk to people and you feel nothing, then that would be boring. Like, let's say you went on a date with someone and you felt nothing. It was just completely just nothing. There was no tension, no push pull, no nothing. Then you're not going to be romantically interested. Or if you watched a TV show or a movie or you read a book and it was just completely flat and even, you're going to be like, this is boring. I don't like this. So people have to realize this is just part of life. And I think some of the downfall of a lot of the modern, healing pop therapy things is they take normal, natural human responses and turn it into a pathology or turn it into something larger than what it actually is. We're like, oh, I have all these complicated, um, mental, emotional issues. And then, well, why? Okay, well, I can find, a bunch of experiences in my life that give me evidence for that. Maybe that's true, maybe it isn't, or maybe they're just not very physically fit. Maybe they don't have competency or confidence in that area of life, so they feel uncomfortable when if they've had familiarity or competency or comfort in that area of their life, then the discomfort would usually go away, or at least it would be counterbalanced with a sense of strength that would more or less most of the time overpower that sense of fear or anxiety. Because even if you think about, great athletes or people that are extremely competent, like Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan or Usain Bolt or any number of people, they probably, I guarantee you, still felt nervous. They still felt afraid. They still had some probably degree of self-doubt or some degree of discomfort. But the fact of the matter is they're already the best in the world and maybe the best in history or however you want to look at it. So it's like that's just part of life. But the fact of the matter is they had such a high degree of strength, competency, and confidence developed over time that it was able to offset and they were able to achieve great things. Granted, you know, it's unlikely that any of us, myself included, are going to be at that level, but we can still extrapolate out and understand the basic mechanics and maybe try to not fall into the trap of making everything a pathology or everything some grandiose spiritual issue when in reality it's more likely that it literally just is what it is. Like, I've talked to people and myself included, I've been there where I experienced some symptom of discomfort. And I'm like, oh, it must be a chakra thing or energy thing, or maybe it's a past life, or maybe it's an intergenerational trauma, or maybe it's emotional thing, or maybe my human design, center is open and maybe this is occurring because I'm a whatever manifesting generator, projector, reflector, 24369, whatever the fuck, Cancer, Capricorn, Aries rising, all this stuff. Or maybe it's just a food allergy, or maybe it's just accumulated stress in the nervous system, or maybe it's just a sense of learned helplessness through repeated incompetence in a scenario that could be resolved through identifying the problem and taking the actions to develop at least a basic sense of competency and familiarity and comfort in that arena of life. Maybe that's actually all that it is. But the problem is we have whole industries built up telling people it's all of these other things and then helping them find all of these other reasons and all these other justifications and explanations and strategies and analyses and paradigms and reparadigms and repackagings of paradigms and analyses and reanalysis of analysis and repackaging of analysis and breakthrough revolutionary discoveries based on all of these things. And it's just basically oftentimes more or less just missing the point and creating a profit driven system, uh, you know, of people being confused and unwell is kind of how I see it and how I've arrived at it over however many years of being in this industry. So sometimes really sometimes there's no other way to do something other than to do it. So in terms of, social anxiety, practicing socializing in small, easy situations could be as easy as just, the checkout line at the grocery or asking a stranger something on the street or asking for help in a store, like, oh, hey, excuse me, could you help me find this? Basic, little, simple, stupid things like that you do and you do it over enough period of time. And then you realize, oh, it's really not that big of a deal. It's really, no problem at all. And then over time, you develop competency and confidence to where it no longer is an issue. It's normal, it's natural, and you can just move on with your life and focus on doing other things. But really, like I've been saying for a while now, the solution to many problems is to feel more comfortable, at ease, and confident within yourself to basically offset naturally the negative consequence, negative feelings that could arise as a consequence of normal, natural human experiences. And I think sadly and unfortunately, those qualities are not emphasized enough, and people are not encouraged enough to do those things. And I've seen this time and time again. I mean, I've seen it in myself in my own life with my own teachers and my own mentors, and and people that I work with, where um, you know, it's like be stronger, be better, improve yourself, challenge yourself. I mean, we're like, I don't know, that feels uncomfortable, that feels hard, that feels difficult. I have all these things coming up, and I need to process all the things coming up, and I have to analyze all the things coming up. It's like, or you could just do the thing. Sure, take note of, what you feel. Obviously, you don't just repress. But then on the flip side, sometimes there is value in ignoring what you feel. And that's kind of like the value of being an adult and having discernment, because there's definitely times where you need to not do what you feel. That's just, like I said, being an adult. If you always did what you felt, I mean, if I always did what I felt, I'd probably just like lay on the couch and play video games and whatever all day long. But then I'll eventually feel terrible about myself because that's all I'm doing. So then what I would do instead of just admitting what I'm doing is wrong is and realize like, oh, maybe I'm depressed, maybe I'm anxious, maybe I have all these problems, maybe I have trauma, rather than looking at, or maybe I just lay on the couch and watch TV and play video games all day, and that makes me feel terrible about myself. And that's why I feel bad. And that's normal. That's natural. That's good. That's the right response to a situation. And I think, unfortunately, within therapy and many other these modalities, is they're kind of demonizing and pathologizing natural, normal human responses, but then also telling people to listen to their feelings. So it's tends to be an approach that's not very effective because it's not really based in clarity or discernment. So that is basically all I have to say about social anxiety, and what I have to say could apply to many different, mental, emotional issues or things that people are dealing with. And I think, again, just to reiterate the point, feeling comfortable, feeling at ease, feeling confident in yourself will help out mostly everything. I mean, and doing things to actually develop confidence, doing things to develop competency, like challenging yourself and learning new things, and just simply, getting more physically fit, getting stronger, doing things daily that make you feel good about yourself. Like, how else will you feel good about yourself if you don't actually do things by which the natural outcome is you feel good about yourself? Like, if you spend X amount of years laying around doing nothing and you're very unproductive, that's going to make you feel bad, which is good. That's normal. That's natural. That bad feeling should tell you to do something different, to make a different choice. Um, so, yeah, hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully that is useful and will give a lot of helpful and actionable insight for anyone, wanting to sort out emotional things or mental things, or especially social anxiety, because again, it comes back to familiarity, competency, and confidence. So being comfortable and confident in your communication skills, which again is based on listening, which is why I've made tons of videos recommending people listen. Uh, Listen to other people, learn to be more attuned and aware of your environment, be able to respond appropriately, and actually developing some competency in those things. So, anyways, I'm just repeating myself at this point. So, that will conclude that section of the live stream. Another question, which I don't know if I should actually do this in this live stream or just do a separate one, but I got another set of questions about internal arts, like Gong, QiGong, and an introduction to what it is and it isn't, why you do it, how to start, differences between Gong and Qigong, talk about your experiences with it, how you found it, how you started, difficulties you had, how it impacted your life positively and negatively. Um, so yeah, if anyone's actually here live on the chat, which some people are, but who knows if they're just, Russian propaganda bots. Maybe drop some chats in the box um, to inform me that I'm actually speaking to humans and not just to myself. Because I can go in and do this piece on internal arts and Nagong, or I can just leave it here for the social anxiety piece of it. So let's see. Montauk Chia, right? um, so actually, on that note, in terms of Montauk Chia, I will say there is a video that I'm working on that I'm gonna call. I went searching for spirituality, but here's what I found instead. Or I went searching for spirituality instead. Here's what I found, and basically pointing out really what I found, which is I thought I would be fine. I thought I would find open-minded, intelligent, free thinkers that are interested solely and exclusively in effective processes which are outcome and objective oriented. Instead, what I found is people engaged in a process of calling something basically anything other than what it actually is, caught up in pretending, make believe, fantasy, imagination, expressing itself via cognitive dissonance, emotional emphasis, uh, emotional overemphasis and fixation, fantasy and imagination, sexual obsession, and basically base desires on steroids. What I found was hyper emotionality, excessive sexuality, drug use, escapism, hedonism, homogeny, standardized views, weird caricatures, mental disassociation, massive conformity, and Marxist identity politics. So, more or less, that's what I found when I went looking for spirituality and internal arts. So, to answer the question of what internal arts, Neigong, Qigong are and aren't, they are not any of the things that I just listed. But those are the things that people do thinking they are internal arts or thinking they are Qigong, Neigong, Tai Chi, Xingyi, Bagua, yoga, meditation, fill in the blank. Those are what people are actually doing. That's what's actually driving them based on my, um, innate ability to be harsh and judgmental and critical. For whatever reason, my brain can very quickly and easily find the wrong and the incorrect in what people are doing, and subsequently find the positive and the correct in what people are doing. It's both. Um, for whatever reason, that's just how I'm wired. So I try to use that for good and for my own benefit most of the time. So when I went looking and exploring in internal arts, that's mostly what I found. And I've made a bunch of videos kind of, you know, dogging on all of those concepts. I made videos. I mean, you can find these videos on my channel. I highly recommend them. When spirituality isn't so spiritual, where I basically went through all the different things that that are what people actually mean by the word spirituality. Because I would talk to people, I would go out and read and research and just observe. When people say the word, what do they actually mean? Because the words we use mean different things to different people all the time. That's just the nature of language. So for me, I try to listen. What does that person actually mean when they use that word? So if you go look back on my channel when spirituality isn't so spiritual or something like that, I sat down. It's kind of long and it's boring, and I'm going to redo it and make it better. But I just went through point by point. This is what people actually mean by this word, and this is what they're actually looking for. Because what the word actually means is direct connection and cultivation of spirit, capital S, the blinding white light that we all come from and that we all return to. It's direct connection to that and direct cultivation of that here and now in the physical form. But usually we only experience that when we're born and when we die, which is why you look at universally across the board, across time, history, and space. Pretty much when people die, they all talk about the white light and the experience of, love and bliss and acceptance and warmth and radiance and eternity and connection and all these things that people are associating with that. Um, that's what the word actually means. But typically, when people literally and really connect with that, now we're talking like Jesus and Buddha level shit, which is not what I'm doing, and it's not what anyone that I've ever met is doing. Well, except with a few people, um, but they're obviously not on that level, but they've at least opened that doorway, and I now actually have a spiritual practice, whereas everyone else, myself included, is just a preparatory practice, a cleaning the temple practice, a building the temple practice, building the container that maybe hopefully, let's pray, someday might connect to that thing, but in no way, shape, or form is actually the thing. So to me, that's what spirituality actually is and means. So now, when I have that actual clear definition, somewhat clear definition, obviously, I mean, it's not perfect, it's still pretty abstract, but that's the nature of words. So that definition, based on pretty much every tradition, has agreed mostly that that's what that word is, when that's what that means. So now I have that as a parameter, a boundary, a framework, a definition. Then now I have as a point of contrast, what is everyone else doing? It's not this. Okay, if it's not this, what is it? Well, let me reflect, observe, and analyze and listen to what people say and listen to what they're actually doing. And that's where I came to those videos and how I've still come to, you know, what I'm saying is hyper emotionality, mental abstraction, or just some obsession with their base desires. Because if you develop any degree of energy or have any degree of stimulation of your nervous system beyond what is your default state, it will go to one or three places. Your base desires, which for most people is going to be coming out through sex, but then taken over a long enough period of time is going to be power, domination, whatever, which that's pretty easy to see. uh, or it's going to go to your intellect. On the bright side, it might help make you more intelligent, more sharp, more clear, more focused, or it will make you very delusional, caught up in fantasy. It really just depends on how your system is structured and organized and already, like, basically, if you do a bunch of mental development to make your mind organized, clear, sharp, logical, ordered, structured, and then you send more energy to it, it's just going to get more of those things. But if your mind is already fantasy based, not clear, very dull, very, it's just not a very sharp thing, and you send more energy to it, or not even more energy, just more electrical activity through your nervous system, forgetting about energy, then it's just going to get more of those things. So what happens is maybe people access things that might sort of kind of get a little more things going in their nervous system, but it just makes whatever's there worse. So people get into all the delusion and flights of fantasy, or it basically, um, the third thing is it goes to their emotions, which if you look at what people are doing in the spiritual world, 99.9% of the time, I guarantee you, it's just doing those things. Um, so yeah, I left Tai Chi after a long time, although I found a school that I consider to be authentic and realistic. It is whatever Master Chu. So I guess one thing I'm curious is, What about it? What about it makes you say it's authentic and realistic, and what does that even mean exactly? Um, and what is it that make you say, "Oh yeah, that's authentic and real"? But I can't really comment. I don't know this person. I can't say to a degree. Um, so I can tell you what I think is authentic and realistic, and I can tell you what, and also I can answer Holy Wafer's question, which is, what do you look for in a decent teacher? I stopped training with my Bagua teacher after achieving barely results. So actually, I can make this very simple, and I can give everyone really a rule or a unit as of measure to judge pretty much any and all internal arts teachers, and to be able to tell whether or not something is authentic. And it really just comes down to whether or not that system has integrated the principles of the I Ching Jing. So to clarify, the I Ching Jing is not a series of practices. It is not postures. It's, if you Google it online, it's literally none of the things that you see online. It is a process of changing the inside of your body. And that process of changing the inside of your body is what makes something transition from external to internal. Um, that's it. So what happened is, historically, all these different schools integrated the principles of the I Ching Jing, whether it was Qigong, Neigong, Tai Chi, Bagua, Xingyi, whatever. They integrated these principles. And from what I've seen, from what I've found, that's the common denominator. And that's the thing that makes something effective, real, potent, or not. If it integrates those principles and takes the people through that process of change and transformation, then it is authentic. If it doesn't, then I don't. Well, I mean, authentic is kind of a stupid word. That's not really a great word, because arsenic and cadmium and mercury are authentic. They happen to be poisonous and deadly, but they're authentic. So yeah, and a lineage can be authentic, but it can be authentically ineffective. People could be ineffective for 1,000 years, so technically it's real, technically it's authentic, but that doesn't mean it's really any good or produces good results. So it's really not it's not really a good word. So I'm telling you, listen to the words I'm using: an internal process of change and transformation. If they have a literal, mapped out, defined, quantified process of doing that, then in my opinion, that's good. Because if you're doing an internal art, why are you doing the internal art? Because you want to go through a legitimate, specific, mapped out process of internal change and development. What is the I Ching Jing process? It is one of many stages of internal change, process, and development to change the literal inside of your body, to change how it functions, to first off open and unbind everything. Secondly, start to actually open, quote unquote, the channels. And then thirdly, actually begin to produce chi in those channels, and then be able to actually move that substance through those channels. But if you don't go through the first process to open the body, then you don't have channels. If you don't have channels, then you don't have chi. If you don't have chi, then you don't have QiGong, you don't have Neigong, you don't have anything internal. So all you're left with is everything everyone else is doing: fantasy, imagination, moving your muscles like hinge joints, or moving your body through muscles and using your hinge joints, or trying to be soft, or trying to be relaxed, or trying to visualize, or I'm this lineage master. Basically, you have everything that everyone else is doing, because they don't have the actual content and the material. That's it. That's all. I mean, it's a gross oversimplification, but at a certain point of view, it is literally that simple. Anyone that I've ever seen that's any good at internal arts, it's through the Jing process. Everyone that I've ever seen that's not any good doesn't have that process. Personally speaking, I did stuff for 10 years, got no results. Started doing the actual QiGong process, very quickly got massive results. So that's it. So if you ask what all of the internal arts are, it's basically different ways of applying the principles of the QiGong, whether that's for Tai Chi or for Bagua or Xingyi or for Qigong or Neigong. So it's like if you take the QiGong principles and you apply it to Qigong, then we could say it is to regulate the magnetic fields that organize the physical structure and beyond, and then changing the quality of the electrical activity that's moving through the system. It's basically it. Has nothing to do with acupuncture channels or any of the other things. It's basically just that, which if you look at it, it's in the word, it's in the definition. What is qi? Well, in terms of qigong, it's basically the magnetic fields and the electrical activity that shapes, animates our experience. So if you have skill in that, that would imply you have to work with the fields and then work with the quality and the quantity of the electrical activity that's circulating through the system. End of story. In terms of Tai Chi, you could apply the QiGong process to change the physical structure to basically, in a very simplistic way, based on my limited knowledge, conduct and move mechanical forces through the body so that when mechanical forces come into your body, whether that's you releasing your mass or the pressure of another person, it doesn't go to your joints, it doesn't go to your muscles, it doesn't do all of the things that it would normally naturally do because Tai Chi has no techniques, it has no gimmicks or tricks. It's just pure internal qualities. That's it. So basically, it's like if the pressure comes in, the normal response, the normal stress response, just as an illustration, is yeah, I gotta press on it. I gotta resist it. Yeah, I gotta tense up. And if you just look at your nervous system, whenever you encounter stress, that's how we all respond. That's natural. If you want to go and lift a weight, you don't go ah, and try to lift a weight being completely relaxed. That doesn't work. And in terms of internal qualities, to illustrate it, you wouldn't go to, let's say, a doctor for surgery, and we walked in the room for surgery, the doctor is just screaming at everyone and berating and belittling everyone. You wouldn't be like, you know what? That guy's in the perfect, calm, centered state to do something very specific. I really trust them. You would not do that. You would say that internal quality is not correct for this thing. Just likewise, you wouldn't you wouldn't be dying laughing. Like the funniest shit you've ever seen in your life, where you're like belly laughing on the floor for 5 minutes. You wouldn't be in that state and go to the gym and be like, you know what, I'm going to hit my PR for my deadlift because that quality is not correct. So we can already see that these emotional qualities have a profound effect on how we can do things. So, just on that same principle, each of the arts has specific internal qualities. So, to illustrate the point, Tai Chi is basically learning to develop very specific internal qualities that are then made manifest through the physiology. But again, if you didn't go through the process to actually open up and unbind your body, can't do it because then now you don't have channels to conduct the fluid of your mind through. You don't have an open body, you don't have channels, you don't have chi, so you literally have nothing. So since you have nothing, what do you have to do? Well, now you have to do what everyone else is trying to do and trying to figure out what's the application of this move or that move, or how do I do this or how do I do that? All these other things to try to fill in the blank because they don't have the actual content and the substance, which is basically the Jing process or the process of changing and developing the correct internal qualities and conditions of the body. Because internal arts, they're not natural, they're not normal, they don't really make sense, they're kind of illogical, they're not easy, and they kind of go counter to how we function. So to get back to my original example, in Tai Chi as an example. For clarity, for the vast majority of the time, the word Qi doesn't mean energy. It just means something that changes and transforms and moves through the body. Because that is also another definition of Qi, is that something which transforms, it moves, or has activity. So it's like, as to illustrate it in terms of Tai Chi, it's like if a pressure or a force comes into your body, it automatically is, let's just say in a perfect ideal state, which I'm not at and very few people are, is that as soon as it hits your body, your entire system adapts and finds balance in relationship to that stress or that pressure, meaning you don't feel it, it doesn't affect you, and you're not stressed whatsoever. That's kind of a pretty far down the line quality. But initially, it's that when the pressure, the stress or the pressure comes in, it's able to conduct through the wetsuit of your body and not go to your joints, not go to muscle contraction, not go to stress, not go to contraction, basically not go to all the things that you're hardwired, that we're all hardwired to do, which is why I say it's such a pain in the ass. Why is it a pain in the ass? Because our identity and our stress response are like this. How we feel strong, how we feel as though we are who we are, is most often felt through stress and contraction and through feeling strong. Meaning, if you feel something strongly, then that tends to make you feel strong, for better or worse. But in everything that we do tends to kind of like make the tissue grip to the bone. It tends to cause the body to do this, which is what I was talking about previously, about the lengthening process. Basically, natural, normal life, it just makes everything bind, which is why basically every old person you see shrinks, right? And every old person you see, their body becomes withered and dry and brittle. Whereas you look at children, they're buoyant, their body, their tissues are bouncy, their bodies are open, loose, flexible, they're hydrated. And that's part of one of the reasons why many of the traditions would use that metaphor to illustrate some of these concepts. So that's why I say this stuff is not natural, it's not easy, it's not intuitive. You can't use your feelings, you can't vibe it out, you can't figure it, like it's not, it's, I mean, maybe if you're an absolute rare genius, maybe, but I haven't seen it, and none of the people that I've ever learned from have seen it. But it might be possible. I'm just saying, just sharing with you my experience. So to answer the question, I think explain a lot of the things in the most easiest, straightforward, direct way. It really just comes down to whether or not they have the e-ginging process. Which, what does that do? Like I said, it starts to actually open the body up so that you have channels, which those channels then can move through varying degrees of depth. So most people start off on what we could call the skin level depth, meaning how deep they actually feel in their body is just very transient, simple, tingling or whatever stuff on the very surface level of their body. That's where most people are. That's pretty much all where they ever will be, which is not a dig. It's just if you haven't gone through the process to take your awareness deeper, you won't. And then a lot of the things that people think are deep are actually not. It's still just skin level. So that's where the vast majority of people are. So the more your body opens, the more channels open, the more chi you build, and the more you're able to refine that thing that you build, which isn't like energy. It's an actual solid, tangible, literal thing that you can move through your body, that can be felt, that you can literally do something with. The more the quality of that changes and is developed and built, is the more that can affect various layers of tissue and physiological things in your body, and the more changes that will create within your mind. So it starts to become like a self-fulfilling thing, where it's like you can't access certain mental qualities because your body isn't open, but then your body isn't open because you don't have certain mental qualities. But since the body is just easier to work with, way easier than the mind, because it's dense, it's a little more solid and real and tangible and constant than the mind and the emotions, which are just fucking all over the place. That's why it's typically used, because it also forms an anchor and it forms like a metric, like a solid quantifiable metric. Oh, did I achieve X, Y, and Z quality? I don't know. Is it actually manifesting in the real world? No. Okay, well then you probably didn't achieve it. So it gives a degree of objectivity and validity and solidity to things that can seem very ephemeral, or again, it's just another example of how this stuff is completely the opposite as to what people think. I've been long saying that spirituality and internal arts is where people come to retire from the scrutiny, from the scrutiny and hard work of life. Because for whatever reason, it's this weird inverse relationship where people would assume they're going to achieve the heights, the highest heights of human potentiality, but they're going to achieve the highest heights of human potentiality by doing the least amount of work and with the least amount of requirement and with the least amount of scrutiny. And it's like, really? That makes no sense. I mean, I don't say that to knock people because I've been there. I say that to just point out the obvious error in the thinking and maybe save someone a decade of going down that road and wasting their life. Um, but it's also like, it's just another example of the way in which this is the opposite of what people think. Chi isn't, I'm just trying to drive home the point. This stuff is very tangible. It's very solid, at least in the very initial stages. So driving home the point of the emphasis in the process of the I Ching Jing. So if you, the first stage is again is just kind of learning to release and open the binding from the body so that then your awareness or your mind fluid can actually penetrate and soak into your body and then actually be able to be stabilized in your body. Because normally our awareness is all over the place all the time. And our awareness is like, you know, has the potency of the width of my fingernail versus what you want it to be is like just like a fucking a boulder, of like density and weight and substance that you can just plant and just it has those qualities. Maybe a boulder is not the best illustration. They usually use something like the sword and the cup, but just to illustrate the point, it's like your awareness actually starts to have a solidity and a substance to it and a real tangible way of knowing where it is, because the way in which it interacts with an object will have effects on that object that you can observe and see that will then tell you if what you're doing is true or if you're just wrong. But that's once you have a certain degree of chi and thickness of chi. Um, but if you haven't actually gone through to open up your body, that door is completely closed, which is why traditionally most practices start with some standing or start with some opening the body to start to remove some of the stuff and just create more space. Because if there's no space in your body, there's no space for the awareness to soak into. And then that is then combined with, other practices to develop stability of mind, calm awareness of mind, to be able to generate more mind fluid, to be able to modulate the quality of the awareness, which is interacting with the object. So define what, Qigong and some of these other internal arts are. I'm telling you the mechanics. A lot of it is just looking at how certain mental qualities are passed through into the physical body and how that produces certain effects. Whether you want to generate more yang, some more electrical activity, or you want to tap into a magnetic field for either a medical reason or to reshape the body or for meditative absorption kind of practice, or you want to basically push things out. You want to pull and open the body and create more space and push out pathogens or push out energy. That's a different quality. Or you want to move and circulate something through the body. That's a different quality. Um, but it's all again based on these simple mechanics of that I listed out through the I Ching Jing and then through the interaction of the mind and the body. So how you can tell whether or not someone is good is whether or not they are discussing these principles, these mechanics, or not. If they're talking about these principles and these mechanics and this process of development, good, because they are engaged in the processes that the terms actually refer to. If they're talking about anything other than that, then that's the process they're engaged in, which is probably some aspect of their emotionality. They want to feel cool. They're trying to medicate their identity, or they're just trying to chill out and relax, or some other thing. Or maybe they just are a dork and they like, you know, they're doing like a cosplay sort of thing, or they really just like the thing. Or maybe they are genuine, but no one ever told them. They never just had the ability or the opportunity to access the other things. You know, it could be really any number of those factors or all of them. It really just depends. But personally speaking, there's very few people that are actually speaking to and engaged in the things that I'm talking about, which I can kind of understand because personally speaking, it confuses people. No one's interested. Um, because what people want is the fake fantasy, emotionally stimulating kind of stuff, which is completely wrong and contradicting the actual processes. But that's what people want. So that becomes a whole self-fulfilling prophecy, which if you, I mean, just go look at people like Eckhart Tolle or basically any major popular teacher, the vast majority of the time, they're not really offering people anything because at a certain point, it literally just is what it is. Um, like if I say, hi, I'm offering methods to open the body, generate mind fluid, and change the quality of your mind so it is more calm and stable, most people are not going to be interested and they're going to be bored by it. But Eckhart Tolle or Deepak Chopra or Mantak Chia and all these other kinds of people are going to come on and say all this grandiose pseudo spiritual science, blah, 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 blah nonsense. And people are like, that's the real thing. That's what I want. But then they literally produce no results. Or I mean, no, I shouldn't say that. They absolutely do produce results, but they just happen to not be results that I am personally interested in or that I find valuable, meaningful, or useful. That's that's the most honest thing that I can say, because some people just want to have a good time and have a bit of fantasy and feel cool about themselves because they're doing something weird, and that's that, which is fine. I mean, that's what they want to do. It's just supply and demand. Um, so yeah, hopefully that provides some clarity on what these things are and answers questions about how to discern real versus fake or useful versus not. That's under the presumption that you actually want to change and develop and engage in the process. If you just want a bit of exercise, then you're better off running. Like, and as a thing, as a form of exercise, internal arts are the biggest waste of time because what makes them have value is the e-ginging process that I just described. If they don't have it, they have very little value. If you want to relax, just literally go in your room and breathe and try to breathe deeply and just move slowly through space. It doesn't matter how you do it because the movements themselves are just movements. Without the actual mechanics inside them, it doesn't matter. So you could literally just do that and shift your weight side to side and get the same benefits, if not more, than doing Tai Chi. But again, it's just kind of a bone of contention because everyone's like, no, 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 my thing's authentic, my thing's realistic, my lineage is the best, or my lineage is true, and I learned from master so and so, and he wears silk robes, and they play Chinese folk music, or I've been doing it for 30 years, or blah, blah. Just all these other things. It's like, cool. Have you gone through, or are you actively engaged in the e-ginging process, and can you speak about it to any degree of detail or depth? Yes. Okay, I'm interested. No. Okay, then what are you doing? If it's an internal art, we're talking about legitimate internal change. Which, what does internal mean? Let's talk about that. it doesn't just mean like inside, because people will be like, oh, it's internal, you can't see it. That's not what it means. Because technically, how people move when they do like fake old people relaxing Tai Chi, technically that is actually internal, because they're just moving from their joints and their bones. Which, if you think about what's the most internal in your body, it tends to be your joints. So that is, based on the definition, that is actually kind of internal. But when we mean internal, we actually mean what's between your skin to your bone, meaning all the tissue layer and the movement of those layers over the bone in relationship, in contrast to the bone. That's more so what it means. Because like I could move my arms like this all day. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Wow, okay, cool. And like that will, of course, maybe relax my shoulders and release maybe a little tension, and maybe it'll be relaxing. It might move a little bit of blood because I'm literally just moving my arms. Cool. I'm just literally moving my arms. And 99% of the time when people are doing Tai Chi or any internal art, that's all they're doing. They're just doing exactly what they're doing, which is just moving their body in some choreographed pattern through space. That's it. Because what gives it meaning, value, purpose, and transformation is the I-Ching process. People can agree or disagree or have their own opinions or have their own whatever. That's totally fine. I'm just sharing my opinion, my experience, and what I've seen in my life, and what has actually had the most realistic, tangible, verifiable effects. Because you may or may not have noticed, but my physical body has changed multiple times in many ways over the last 5-6 years. And I would say, to a large degree, even my personality and my affect has subsequently also changed for better and for worse. There's times where it definitely got a bit worse, and I just got more angry and more irritated and more annoyed. Why? Because I had more yang electrical activity in my nervous system that was just hitting my inherent frustration and liver chi constraint. And it was just making it a little more worse. So, yeah. Anyways, I tend to avoid talking about the subject because mostly when you talk to people, they have it all wrong. So that either leads to a point of conflict or a point of, no, 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 mine's authentic, mine's legit, my master's, whatever. It's like, okay, fine, whatever. People will find their way to things if they need to or if they want to. So hopefully that gives some food for thought and answers the questions in some degree of detail and depth, to the best of my ability, at least right now, in the simplest of terms. I could talk about it a lot more, but I think the I-Ching process and mechanics that I talked about, and the actual changing of the internal structure, is really, that's what makes up the various applications of the arts. They just took those things in a different direction and applied them in different ways, and they each have distinct mechanics. Xingyi has different mechanics than Tai Chi. Tai Chi has different mechanics than Bagua. Bagua has different mechanics than Tai Chi, etc. They're all kind of different and distinct mechanics, and some of it's actually very sequential. Like people don't realize this, but the presumption of Tai Chi is that you're already a world-class fighter. You're already top of your game, and you just want to maybe take it to the next level. You're already a highly skilled martial artist, and now you want to go to levels beyond. That was classically the presumption under which people would start. The presumption of Bagua is that you're already a world-class fighter, and then you mastered Tai Chi, so now you need another challenge. So now let's go to Bagua. But then people think they can just jump in and, oh, I'm going to do this. It's like, well, no, you're literally just doing exactly what you're doing. Your desk worker, desk jockey, porn, video game, sex addict, sensory junkie body. Now you're flapping your arms through space and, forcibly putting your intention on your body. And you call that Bagua. No, that's not what it is. That's not what the words mean. That's not what the tradition is. It's not what the teachings are. That's not what any of it is. It just literally, this is what you're doing. This is what this thing is. So we're going to need some process to hopefully move us closer to the thing over here. Maybe we'll never reach it. Maybe we will. But the idea is we should be moving on a process It takes us closer to it. What does that process entail? Acknowledging all of our errors and correcting them, acknowledging all our deficiencies and making them stronger, acknowledging all of our excesses and bringing them into balance, taking all of the distortions out of our psychology and making them normal. That's it. That's like, those are just preparatory initial stages, which is in and of itself a lot. So that's why I tend to speak about these things in terms of, yeah, it's a pain in the ass. Yeah, it can ruin your life, because for a lot of people, a lot of their life is built within their stress response. And if you took your stress response and pull the fucking plug out of it and just turn it off completely, all the things that were built upon it might fall away too, which can be a bit of a hassle, let's say. But again, I say these things, people doubt me, they think I'm wrong, or they think I'm an idiot, or they think I'm making it up. But then, yeah, engage in the process and see what happens. I'm not saying it because I think it's cool or I like it. It's just based in experience. What do you think of the fighting aspects of internal arts, like people who claim they can fight doing it? I mean, usually people that claim they can fight doing it get beat up. I think it comes down to multiple things. First is, if people actually want to learn fighting, just go learn boxing or kickboxing or jujitsu or MMA. Those are like obviously the clearest, most direct path to actually learning to fight another human being. But just as a caveat, that's not my area of expertise. It never has been, and I've never claimed it as such, which was why I've never talked about it, because I have no real intimacy on that side of it. I only know what I've been told and what I've seen and what I've heard in terms of that aspect of it, so I can't really speak on it. But also the assumption with the internal arts classically was that you should already be a good fighter. Being a good fighter is just punching, kicking, and grappling. As far as from what I've seen, I don't know, again, from personal experience, being a good fighter isn't going, "Ugh, I can do single whip and I'm going to hit you and then I'm going to hit you with my whip." Like all this just idiocy that you see people do. Or like, "I'm going to use a chi ball and block your punch." Like, come on, guys. Like, give me a break. So I think the reality is learning to fight is a unique, or is a skill set in and of itself that is not really in internal arts. It's those are things which would be built upon that. Learning to fight is punching, kicking, grappling. I mean, look at UFC, look at MMA. They're not I'm doing Bagua. Like, it's not, fighting is just that. And it boggles my mind that people don't really get that. So I think it's just more cosplay and confusion that people get caught up in. But again, it's not my area of expertise or emphasis, so people can make up their own mind. But I think if you want to learn to fight, then just go learn to fight, which means you need to be strong and you need to develop all these basic physical characteristics, which if you actually have them, then internal arts will be a lot easier, actually. Where can we learn this outside of Damo's 5-year course? Nowhere that I'm aware of. So that's it. I give people the information. I give people the resources. That's it. If there were other options, or there were easier options or better options, that's what I would provide. But as far as I see it, you just find someone you could, well, okay, I can answer that. So find someone locally that is trained under him and learn with them directly. But you would also probably want to go through the online program to use it as a subset. Because the thing is, you can't figure this stuff out on your own. You need a teacher, because you'll get it wrong. We all will get it wrong, which is just natural. Anytime you learn something new, you're going to get it wrong because you don't know, because you don't have the skill, which is why you're learning it in the first place, is because you don't have the skill. Because you don't have the skill, you need to learn from someone who has the skill, which means you need to learn to correct your errors and move closer from where you are to get closer to where the practice is trying to get you. That's basically it, as far as I can make out in my limited experience. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Have a teacher, find someone, and then put in a lot of hours on your own by yourself to try and make the things work. Um, because I notice even when I go to workshops and I see people, a lot of people's questions would be answered if they just actually trained more or they just actually put in the time. But because they ask the questions they ask, I can tell they don't put in the time. I can tell they don't put in the effort. And I can see people that I've known for 8, 10 years, they're still asking the same basic questions that they were asking 8 to 10 years ago, which says, okay, they're not really training, which is cool. I mean, they have their own reasons and their own motivations and their own life and their own path. Great. But in terms of actually learning, developing, and growing, I don't really see it in a lot of the people that I've observed over the years, which I guess is mean for me to say, but it's like growth and transformation is the process. So if that's not occurring, then the process is not occurring, which means something's off in the equation. Just kind of simple math. And I look at that within my own self as well. Like, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm going through. Like, what can I improve? What can I change? What error can I correct that is impeding the process or the progress in some capacity? So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Cool. So hopefully that's given everyone some food for thought and some useful insights. If there's no more questions, I'll probably jump off soon. So if there are more questions, drop them in the chat and I'll answer them. Otherwise, I have already exhausted my outline and I have other things that I need to do soon. I realize I didn't answer all the questions about the internal arts, but I can easily just do another follow-up and share more about that. And also I've made videos talking about some of this stuff already before, just in previous, over the last year or whatever. But I understand that from the outside, if you don't know the language, don't know the words, the parlance, whatever you want to call it, the gibberish, and especially if you don't engage in the process, then a lot of it doesn't make sense. And I can fully relate. I mean, I can look at many things that I've learned over the years that I was kind of like, yeah, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense. But I just keep pushing forward. And then I get to a point one day where it's like, oh, that's what that meant. This is what this is referring to. And you just figure out things through actually engaging in the process and doing the practice, and trying to do it as correctly or close to correct as I can, relatively speaking, because we'll always change. And so yeah, there's no more questions as far as I can tell. So thanks again, everyone, for showing up and for listening. And if you showed up late, definitely go back and check out the first part. And again, if you have requests for future live streams, feel free to drop them in the comments and I will do my best to do a live stream and cover it and answer your questions in as much detail as I can. And hopefully you can learn from my mistakes and my life experience to save yourself, hopefully, some time, energy, and maybe even money. So yeah, thanks again for tuning in. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day wherever they are on the planet. And I will talk to you soon.